climate change, of resource management, and all of the, the other, if you like, building blocks of sustainability, it then also gets us questioning, well, what do we really need to be training people for the world of work to actually implement in a sustainable way when they go out into the wider world? And it's not just in the work environment, it's in their communities and so forth. And to some extent, it is a little bit of a moving target, but I think that just again, to really overall summarise, I mean, when I've sort of picked on fire ecologists, this is sort of going back to my roots. I used to be a fire ecologist. That was when in the real world. But anyway, I mean, fire ecology and climate change, we've seen over the last, 5 years, we've had some absolutely disastrous fires, particularly what's going on at the moment, even in California. I mean, every year on year, we're getting a real problem with increased fires. Part of that is in response to climate change. Now, how should we incorporate that in our curriculum? This is something we've got to address. Coastal management, I mean, I'm sure I don't need to say anything about that here in Florida. You just look at the maps, if we're going to be, well, the research is still kind of out in terms of a certain piece of research said the potential for sea level rise is going to be 20 feet in possibly the next 100 years or so. Another research report is saying 11 feet. But I mean, whichever is correct there, the impact on Florida is going to be absolutely horrendous. What are Floridians doing about it? This whole debate now has changed from, if you like, climate sort of skepticism to adaptation. So there again, how should higher education actually react and respond and prepare people for that? And that sort of preparation, I think, pervades literally every single one of the curricular subjects. Engineering, I mean, again, sort of being tied in a little bit with green jobs. I mean, are we teaching through the engineering courses? Are we preparing them for green jobs? I'm afraid I'm sort of using green jobs without really defining it, and it's. I still find this whole area of green jobs quite an interesting one, because, and just to give you a little bit of a take of mine on this, is that I've been doing a little bit of work with GE, and in fact I'm running a symposium in November on green jobs for the WEEC, which is the World Energy Engineers Congress. And I've actually got a senior VP as a speaker from GE, and he still needs engineers. He still needs basic mechanical engineers, even though they're going to be engineering the new generation of wind generators. He still needs engineers. So to some extent, I think that he's not asking for green engineers. He's asking for engineers. So I still think the actual context in terms of basic skills, where we're going, even with the green jobs movement as it now seems to be grabbing the headlines, is still this whole basic knowledge that they need this founding in say, for GE basic engineering skills. So I think we have to treat the whole sort of green jobs area with a little bit of caution in a way. Green product design, again, this is, what do we mean by green product? I think that certainly looking at something like life cycle assessment and actually looking at the effects of materials, for example, that on the environment, and this whole business about, I mean, I quite like dabbling with LCA, life cycle assessment. I mean, it's now very much more than the cradle to grave study, is sort of the conception to resurrection type of study. For those of you who are not sort of too familiar with the, if you like, the differences between those in terms of definition. I mean, the conception to resurrection is if you're building a car, look at all the metals, where do they come from, what's the environmental impact, but also at the other end of the scale, what do you do with an old car? And this is where Volvo actually took this to heart, because ages ago in Europe they were actually advertising Volvos as being 99% recyclable. So in other words, that's the resurrection bit of the equation. So I think that, you know, in terms of actually training up people and in a higher education context to actually be able to understand these analyses and actually put them into practice in the workplace, particularly if you know they're in the whole product design area, then I think that's also quite, you know, a useful sort of tool to their toolbox. I know we've got recently a sort of course come up on much more of the sustainable design aspects. I believe that has been recently offered. And again, this whole economics, finance and accounting, well, you know, when I was back in London, I used to work in the financial services district in London, in what they call the Square Mile. And at that time, I mean, I'm going back 15 years, the banks, the finance houses, the insurance, well, not necessarily insurance, but certainly the investment sector, they didn't want to know about environment management. They kept saying to me, look, we're bankers. What have we got to do with the environment? And now what you've found, again, this is interesting because there's an absolute sea change. Every single one of the banks are producing sustainability reports. And again, that change has come through so quickly. This other area of cap and trade finance, now this is purely a financial instrument. It's not environmental, it's financial. And to some extent, okay, the allocations might be environmental in the broader sense, but really the mechanism is financial, and we've got to get our students understanding what cap and trade is to move on to perhaps make it workable. And I think that is what's going to happen here in the US before long. And certainly there's a lot of movement at the moment towards that. Again, it's not a clear distinction between cap and trade and taxing our way out global warming, but again, you know, we've got to prepare people, you know, from the higher education standpoint of actually dealing with these things. Last few slides. Now, integrating sustainability into the curriculum. Now, I have actually pulled on this report a little bit. It's certainly, I think, now readily accepted that in certain topics that, you know, sustainability is, if you like, here to stay. You can, you know, sort of scan, and I'll show you this slide in a moment. There are various studies actually looking at the amount of sustainability in undergraduate education, and it's getting there. It's a bit of a drip feed, I think, at the moment. At the same time, with regard to the undergrads, there are dedicated courses. I mean, I think it's at Maybury College and various other colleges seem to be noted for their sustainability courses. At postgraduate level, there's one or two sustainability MBAs. But then on the other hand, sustainability is very often being seen as a module in an MBA. And I think there's sort of definitely a differentiation there between a sustainability MBA and an elective, as it were, in an MBA. And in fact, I did write an elective in an MBA for George Mason University, where I am at the moment in Virginia. And you've got this whole area of post-experiential learning and continual professional development. And I've actually picked on just one example here because I think we're in a potentially problem situation in terms of some of the courses in continuing professional development. The AEE, the Association of Environmental Engineers, now energy engineers, they've actually got a sustainable development course. They call it sustainable development. When you actually look at what it is, it's number one, energy, it's number two, buildings. It's not sustainable development whatsoever. It doesn't